Findings on the new controversial EU Fiscal Pact, which is up for referendum.
Ireland has had to put up with searching inspections into its finances. It's the price of the EU IMF bailout. Now the country is deciding whether it will permit more nosiness and tellings-offs and fines if it's naughty. A referendum in a fortnight's time will ask the Irish people if they want to ratify a pact aimed at imposing more economic discipline on EU member states. The battle lines have been drawn, but a sizable number of voters still don't know what side to join.
I haven't decided yet.
And why is that?
Because I don't know anything about it.
I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that yet. I have yet to make up my mind.
Well, I'm going to vote yes. I think it's good for the country. I don't have any problem with it.
I would say no, definitely.
And why that?
Because the government is so corrupt at the moment, everything is so screwed up. I closed my own business up recently, and I'm had enough of it.
I will probably vote no.
Why is that?
Mainly because I'm not very happy with how things have gone.
There's only one choice, I think. That's you have to vote yes.
While the yes vote is ahead in the polls, the contest for hearts and minds is far from over.
A poll today tells us that 40% of people say they're going to vote yes, close to 25% say they're going to vote no, but crucially 35% say they don't know how they're going to vote in 2 weeks' time. So there's a really large element of the electorate that just don't know and could be heavily influenced by political events over the next 2 weeks.
Inside Leinster House, the ruling coalition is strongly campaigning for a yes vote.
I think you can see the changes of a now stable government has actually had impacted on Ireland and its direct investment into Ireland. You can see the changes of the regulatory systems that we put in place, and the last piece of the jigsaw is obviously to have stability not only in our currency but also stability in the European community that we're a member of. That's why we've taken the choice of asking the Irish people to give us the permission to ratify this treaty, and I think it's a good and positive thing that there are sets of rules that govern not just Ireland but every single member state across the European community to make sure that we never find ourselves in the position of falling off the cliff that we did in 2007.
But there's no unanimity within the Dáil. Sinn Féin argues that austerity hasn't worked and more of the same will prove bad for Ireland.
The people across the state know fine well what the policies of austerity mean. They've had 5 very severe austerity budgets, which has resulted in 440,000 people unemployed. We have 9 people immigrating the state every single hour. 91 families every day are falling into mortgage distress. So they know what this means, and they know that this austerity treaty will mean more of that. It basically enshrines austerity into national parliament, into national laws. It allows the European Commission to be the judge and jury over how we're doing.
The election of François Hollande has boosted the arguments of the trade unions. Before the new treaty is ratified, the French president wants the EU to approve a growth pact to get Europe moving. That's something the trade unions are united around, even if they can't settle on an agreed position on the referendum.
There are changes really in the tectonic plates in terms of thinking in Europe about the possibilities of growth and stimulus. We ought to not undermine those efforts by rushing in to ratify. We ought to give, in fact, as much support as we can to Hollande, to the German Social Democrats and to people who are of that point of view to see if we can get a better end outcome out of the whole thing.
In Greece, the dire state of the economy, coupled with austerity budgets, has some talking of life outside the euro. That finds no real echo in Ireland, where the euro is still the currency of choice.
I think the euro is here to stay. A poll today showed us that more than 3/4 of the electorate wanted to stick with the euro. Even people on the no side of this referendum, like Sinn Féin, the United Left Alliance, which is a group of left-wing TDs, parliamentarians, they're saying no, we want to stick with the euro.
The government here is convinced it will win the vote in 2 weeks' time. But what happens if it doesn't? Dublin has a bit of a tradition of asking the question until it gets the right answer. But that may not happen in this case, because strictly speaking, Brussels doesn't need Irish support, assuming sufficient countries back the treaty elsewhere. But it would spoil Ireland's reputation as a poster boy for tough economic reform. Jimmy Delargy, UTV Live tonight, Grafton Street, Dublin.
Well, with the austerity measures being imposed to reduce the budget deficit, many are beginning to question if such a strategy is right for an economy suffering from a lack of spending. Gareth Wilkinson was in Donegal, where he found the anti-austerity movement was growing.
Signs of discontent. Within Donegal's scenic landscape, anger is growing. Austerity has been prescribed to heal Ireland's ailing economy. It's been a hard medicine to swallow. The cuts imposed for years have cost jobs and services. Prices have risen as incomes have fallen. Now a fight back's begun. Unemployed construction worker Joe Murphy has taken to the streets and roads to highlight his opposition.
It's been proven now over the last few years that austerity isn't working. It's not working. You know, we have to have a new approach on this here now. We're cutting everything back. Nobody has any money to spend, no spare money. So the whole thing's just coming stagnant.
In March, Joe and others embarked on a protest walk from Mallinhead to Dublin. It took 21 days to walk nearly 300 miles. They brought their anti-austerity message from Ireland's most northerly point to the very heart of Irish government in the Dáil. Along the way, they picked up support.
It had a massive impact. I mean, when you walk up O'Connell Street, 5 fellas from Donegal walk up O'Connell Street, and you have O'Connell Street lined with people clapping and cheering as you walk up O'Connell Street. That's you know, that kind of brings it back. You know, it brings it into reality for you.
You feel you've touched a nerve then?
We did touch a nerve, and we touched a nerve with everybody all over Ireland.
In the aftermath of the banking collapse and IMF bailout, more and more people are becoming politicised. Anti-austerity campaigns are planned in the homes of ordinary people, people who feel they're paying for the mistakes of politicians and the banks.
You know, people's lost the money without no mortgage and things like that. Still to pay the mortgage even when they do lose the jobs or go down to 2 days a week. Whereas the bankers are getting, you know, the government are giving bankers money, our money basically, that we didn't take a gamble. They took the gamble, we're paying for their gamble.
And if we didn't have to pay the Anglo-Irish bondholders, we could put this money back into the economy and get the kickstart this economy and get people back to work.
The grassroots are mobilising. Unemployed since the recession hit, Owen Curran has helped unleash a revolt. From his home in the shadow of Mount Errigal, he helped found the Can't Pay, Won't Pay group, which has opposed the imposition of a €100 charge for every house in the country. The Irish government says it's a tax to help pay for local services, but the 31st of March payment deadline has come and gone, and 73% of householders in Donegal are still refusing to pay, the highest rate of non-compliance in the country.
40,000 households who have refused to pay this tax out of 65,000 were supposed to pay. So the vast majority of the people is not paying this tax. They're bedded down, and I think they're into the struggle for the long term as well. Like, the European leaders are driving their societies over the cliff with these austerity measures. And I think people in Donegal are shrewd enough to see on the ground that how it's affecting, we'll say, school cutbacks, the cutbacks in the health services, the cutbacks in the care for the old and the young, and obviously massive unemployment and emigration.
It seems that here in Donegal the tide has swung against austerity, and the arguments for and against cuts continues to rage right across Ireland. In just over 3 weeks, voters go to the polls here in a referendum on an EU fiscal treaty. The government's hoping that it will be passed, but many are finding expression for their anger and frustrations in a campaign for a no vote. Donegal may be located right on the very edge of Europe, but the county's caught a mood which is beginning to develop in other parts of the Eurozone. Gareth Wilkinson, UTV Live tonight, Donegal.
Watching those reports with me in the studio is the economist Mike Smith. Has Ireland any way of avoiding this austerity?
The short answer is no. I think the piece argued that it was the bankers' fault. You could also argue that the politicians who bailed out Anglo-Irish Bank made a big mistake in doing that. Either way, taxpayers have to pay. And I think, having said that, Ireland's in a much, much better position than Greece. But there is no alternative to it.
I'd like to come to Greece in a moment, but before that, if Ireland doesn't vote yes, would that put the bailout at risk?
Well, it may do. The treaty will still be ratified, and Ireland has met all its targets. The Troika has given it very glowing reports up to now. So if its growth forecasts are maintained, there's every reason to believe that it will exit the bail without a second bailout.
So what would happen if Ireland voted no? What would that do to Ireland's reputation?
Well, there is, in the current climate, with the uncertainty about Greece, I think instability is the enemy. I think Ireland has done very well from foreign direct investment. It has a low rate of corporation tax. That could be jeopardised by the signal that a no vote would send out. It mightn't make Ireland just quite the safe haven that it's seen, particularly for North American investors.
Do you think that the new French president's appeal for a growth pact, this will be a plan to get Europe out of recession, will that gather any support along the way?
The limiting factor there is Germany. There's a limit to what the Germans are prepared to do in terms of growth. And if it's growth, it will be some modest stimulus of infrastructure spending. In no sense is there going to be a Marshall Plan for Greece and that, because if they help Greece at the present time to grow, then Ireland can legitimately say, well, why don't you help us? And Portugal can say the same. So I really don't think, I think it's austerity or, there's Hobson's choice.
And if Greece should leave the euro, what would be the impact on Ireland?
Well, the impact on Ireland, I think it could be quite catastrophic for us all. It could trigger another banking crisis. Already the Spanish banks there's rumours of a run on one of the Spanish banks today. The Spanish situation is the one to watch now. If Greece was to leave, it would be very messy. I think French, German, British banks, the interbank market would freeze up again. Whether the European Central Bank and the governments have enough money to bail out and recapitalise banks again, that's a great uncertainty. So I think it's potentially catastrophic.
Mike Smith, thank you. Coming later in the programme, can Ulster upset the odds?